Okay, so the purpose of this video is to give you a demonstration on chocolate chip cookie making, specifically the creaming method. We're going to review some information that will help you do the assignments. Okay, so in Bake Shop, if you were here, we do the science of the chocolate chip cookie experiment, where there's 10 different versions of the same cookie made, and each cookie, one ingredient is changed. I always demonstrate the control cookie, which is a typical chocolate chip cookie. We make it on the 8-quart mixer that we have, 8-quart KitchenAid mixer. We use the mixing bowl and the paddle. This is the paddle attachment. The KitchenAid mixers come with 3 attachments. We have the paddle, the whip, and the dough hook, okay? So the paddle is used for creaming. It's also the attachment that's used most frequently. So if you're ever not sure which attachments to grab, the paddle, 9 out of 10 times, if you guess it, you're gonna be right. The whip attachment, so this is a whip with a P. This guy is a whisk with a K. So the whip attachment, they both do similar things, is designed to aerate. So if you're whipping cream or whipping egg whites for meringue, making frosting, something where you want a lot of large volume, you use the whip. The dough hook is used mostly for bread making, right? So it's designed, as it's mixing in the bowl, to take the gluten and like stretch it and pull it against the bowl to develop the gluten. So for bread, it's great. You always want to think about what would happen. So like if you went to make bread dough with a whip, you would hurt the whip, damage the equipment, wouldn't come out very well. You went to whip cream with the dough hook, you wouldn't get volume. It just wouldn't happen, right? So you want to use the proper tool for the job. So for the creaming method, you always use the paddle attachment, this guy, okay? When we bake, even outside of baking in a professional kitchen, there's a term called mise en place. Translated from French, it literally means everything in its place. So this is what a recipe in Bake Shop looks like. You can see right here, all the ingredients are listed. So before I started recording, I took a second and I scaled out my mise en place on the sheet pan. So you can see I have butter at room temperature, light brown and sugar and granulated sugar mixed together. I have my 2 eggs, also at room temperature. I have my vanilla extract weighed out, my bread flour. I also have my salt in a little cupcake paper, my baking soda in a little cupcake paper, and my chocolate chips, okay? If you just heard me mention, I did say we weigh it out. We use digital scales in the Bake Shop. This is what one of the ones we have looks like. See, I just turned it on. It works based off pressure. So if you, it's not going to be able to work well when it's angled. The numbers change, but the way it works, you put a container on the scale, you zero it out, and then you add your ingredients in to measure out the quantity you need, okay? Before digital scales became super popular, there was something called a baker scale, which is right back here. The way the baker scale works, you have the scale scoop, you have a counterweight. So if you put the scale scoop on the scale, see how it's level right now? And then I add the scale scoop, and it's not level. The counterweight makes it level. Then let's say I wanted to weigh a pound, 8 ounces of something, put a pound weight on this side, change them to 8 ounces, and you would fill this until it leveled out completely with your ingredient, right? On a digital scale, again, if you just put this on, zero it off, pour your ingredient in until it's at 1 pound, 8 ounces. Digital scales are much quicker and a little bit more accurate than a baker scale. That said, a baker scale is much more accurate than volume measure, which which is what you probably bake with at home if you bake at home, right? So your recipe might call for a half a cup of something. In the bake shop, we always don't use volume measure. The exception is small ingredients, so we still use teaspoons, anything up to a tablespoon. You can use a measurer for it. That's because the scale won't weigh it accurately that small of an amount. Okay, so whenever we start to bake, we gather our mise en place. That's what I have on the tray here. Then what I'm going to do, take my mixing bowl. When I went over the ingredients, I did mention this was room temperature butter, right? So put your room temperature butter in the bowl. First step of the creaming method, room temperature butter and the sugar. This is brown sugar and white sugar mixed together. Go in the bowl. And then I said, right, use our paddle attachment. We're gonna snap the bowl onto the mixer. Put your attachment on by lining up the notches. When you start mixing cookies, you saw me just put the sugar and butter in the bowl, right? So you very much have sugar and you have butter. On a low speed, you want to turn the mixer on until you end up with a mixture that looks more like wet sand. And then after you get wet sand, you're gonna cream it on medium speed until it's light and fluffy. All right, so let's see. Okay, so we have come together, we're kind of sandy. At this point, you're gonna turn this up to medium speed. And you're gonna beat it until it's light and fluffy. We'll see what that looks like in a second. Okay, so now it's been about 2-3 minutes. So again, you wanna cream at medium speed, and you can see that we went from our kind of sandy mixture to light and fluffy. We've got light and fluffy. I'm gonna show you with the spatula. Definitely doesn't look like butter and sugar anymore. When you use cold butter, you aren't able to create air pockets, right? So with room temperature butter, think of like the crystals of sugar. When you have room temperature butter and you cream it all together, the sugar crystals cut into the butter and the fat, and it creates these lovely air pockets. If you don't have room temperature butter, you don't get those air pockets, and it creates a very different cookie in the end, okay? So before I'm gonna move on, I'm gonna scrape my bowl really well with a rubber spatula. Let's get this handy to this bowl. You want to make sure that your butter and sugar is well creamed before you add your eggs. Remember, my eggs are also room temperature. We're gonna add our eggs one at a time. Always add your ingredients on a low speed and then turn the speed up. We add our eggs one at a time because we don't want to break the emulsification. We also have our eggs at room temperature because we need an emulsification to happen. So egg whites are full of water, but egg yolks are full of something called lecithin. Lecithin is a perfect emulsifier. You need an emulsifier to keep fat and water together. Think of a salad dressing. When you have oil and vinegar, you either use a lot of friction shaping it or a fat, mustard or mayonnaise or egg yolks, again, to bring the two together. As soon as you add one egg in, again, you should see that it changes. Lighter in color and in volume. Let's put the bowl down so we get a better view. Okay. All right, so we're going to scrape the bowl now, add the second egg, and I'll show you what it looks like at that point. All right, so I just added my second egg in, and you can see the volume in the bowl. It's grown, it's bigger, lighter, and fluffier again. So that's what you're looking for with the eggs. If your mixture ends up looking like cottage cheese, like it's broken, It's because your emulsification broke between your eggs and your ingredients, okay? So you always want to make sure your eggs are room temperature and that you add them gradually. The next ingredient that goes in is our vanilla extract. Add the vanilla in. Again, low speed. You just want to mix to combine. Doesn't take long at all. Anytime you're adding an ingredient, before you move on to the next, you want to scrape with the rubber spatula. We scrape to make sure that all of the ingredients get evenly distributed, especially with the butter and sugar. You don't want to end up with fat, like chunks in your dough. So always a good idea to scrape it well. The next set of ingredients that are going to go in are what we consider dry ingredients. The chocolate chip cookie here at BBT actually calls for bread flour. So this is our bread flour. And I'm going to take my baking soda, which is a leavener, add it in, and my kosher salt. Just like you want to scrape your ingredients in the bowl to incorporate them, before you add these dry ingredients in, you want to mix the leavener and the salt into the flour. Okay, so I'm using a whisk to do that. Like I just said, we use bread flour. So bread flour has the most amount of gluten in it. Gluten in baked goods is responsible for like the structure and the strength, okay? Bread flour has the most, cake flour has the least, all-purpose is in the middle. In a cookie, we're not gonna knead our cookie dough the way we knead bread dough, so we're not gonna fully develop the gluten, but using bread flour versus all-purpose flour will give the cookie a nice chewy texture because the extra gluten adds a little elasticity, okay? I'm gonna lower the bowl down so I can dump my dry ingredients in all at once. And when you go to mix, you only wanna mix the dry ingredients in until it's about 3/4 of the way incorporated on a low speed because you don't really wanna make a mess. We don't want our flour goes everywhere, right? So as soon as the flour is 3/4 of the way incorporated, I'm going to stop and turn it off. Okay, so I very much still have flour and buttery dough in my bowl. Using your fingers, you want to get all of this product off the mixer because it's money, okay? We don't want to leave behind 3 cookies on our paddle attachment. The reason we don't mix the flour in fully on the mixer is because we're making chocolate chip cookies, right? So there's still one very important ingredient I have not added to the bowl, my chocolate chips. So if we were to mix it fully on the mixer and then go to add in our chocolate chips, that it would actually be overmixed and we would have developed the gluten a little bit too much. So by only mixing it 3/4 of the way in, you're gonna dump your chocolate chips in, and then again, using the rubber spatula, we're gonna finish mixing it by hand. So you don't want to stir in, that won't be very effective. We are gonna fold the chocolate chips into the cookie dough. Let's see if we can get a good camera angle of this, right? So, to fold in the cookies, we're gonna use the spatula and cut the cookie dough in half and fold it up against itself and then press back up against the bowl, okay? So, you can see what it starts. That's how it looks when it starts. Again, cut in half, fold over, and push it back up against the bowl. It shouldn't take more than 10 folds to mix the chocolate chips in, okay? We're looking much better than where we started. It's pretty close. Make sure you scrape around the edge. Always see that nub on the bottom of the bowl? That's part of why you want to make sure you scrape really well too, because you don't want flour and sugar to be stuck right there. Now we very much have a cohesive dough compared to where we started, okay? When we go to make our cookies, again, in a professional setting, we want to work as efficiently as possible. This is called a number 30 scoop. Instead of eyeballing our cookies, we're going to make sure that we scoop them all nice and level and consistent, because we want to end up with 32 cookies that look just like this, right? What do you think would happen if, when we were scooping cookies, we scooped them and we ended up with cookies that look like that? The bigger monster, that's how they should look, and this little baby guy, okay? If we went to bake those 3 cookies together on a tray, and we baked them for the right amount of time for that cookie, this cookie would still be raw, and this cookie would be burnt, okay? Also, going back to money, if the recipe says we should get 32 of this size, and we scoop them like this, we're not gonna get 32. That's gonna throw off our profit margin. And then from our customer satisfaction, if you come in and you bought 3 cookies, you would be kind of annoyed if they were all different sizes, especially if you had 3 kids, let's say, and Johnny got the big cookie, Susie got this cookie, and then Sally got this little baby one. Like, Sally's gonna be jealous that Johnny got such a good cookie and she didn't, okay? So consistency is key. I'm gonna scoop these cookies and I'm gonna show you what they look like when they're done scooped. Okay, I'm almost done scooping my cookies, and I wanted to show you and highlight the importance of scraping your bowl, right? It doesn't look like there's a lot of cookie dough left in here. Okay, I'm almost done scooping my chocolate chip cookies. But I wanted to take a second to show you what's left in my bowl. Now, it doesn't look like there's a lot of dough left in there, but I want to highlight the importance of scraping your bowl, right? Again, it all comes back to money. Most of the time, students will say, that's good enough, looks close, that's not a cookie. And a lot of the times, I will take the rubber spatula and scrape the bowl and get 2 to 3 more cookies out of what's left, okay? If every time we're making cookies, we're throwing, see, perfect scoop, we're throwing a cookie or 2 away, we're literally just throwing money in the trash. So it's super important that we're not throwing our money away, because the profit margins are so thin. I've got a half sheet pan with 1 dozen cookies on it, and then a full sheet pan with 2 dozen cookies on it. So my batch of cookies made 36, just like it was supposed to. What's gonna happen now, these have to rest for a half hour before they get baked, okay? So again, I made cookie number 1, which is the control. Cookie number 2 through 10 all have a different variable. Cookie number 2 gets mixed with the dump method. Remember, I just did the creaming method. The dump method is different in the sense that you dump everything in a bowl and mix it all together. So you still want to use room temperature butter, and you want to make sure you crack your egg. You don't want to just dump the whole egg in the bowl. No one wants eggshell. But all of the ingredients, from butter to chocolate chips, go in the mixing bowl at once. You turn it on, and you mix it until it looks like cookie dough, okay? So number 2 is the dump method. Cookie number 3, cookie number 3 is made with cold butter and cold eggs, and we don't scrape it. Cookie number 4, we don't mix it on the mixer. We mix it by hand. And we also make it with melted butter. Cookie number 5, we take the baking soda out of, so there's no leavener in it whatsoever. Cookie number 6, instead of having brown sugar and light sugar, it has all white sugar. Cookie number 7 has all brown sugar. Cookie number 8, we triple the baking soda that's in it, so we increase the amount of leavener. Cookie number 9, we take out the baking soda and we put in baking powder. Baking powder is a different kind of leavener. Cookie number 10, instead of making it with cake flour, instead of making it with bread flour. So cookie number 10, instead of making it with bread flour, remember that is a lot of gluten, we make it with cake flour, which is the least amount of gluten. So that's what your classmates will work on. Each student makes one cookie type, and then we compare and contrast all of the different cookies. So this video is going to be followed up with a PowerPoint slideshow with pictures of the different cookies, and you're going to have an activity that has to do with that. You're also going to have to do a research assignment that is connected to all the ingredients in the chocolate cookie and all of their functions, okay? Hopefully you learned a couple things in the chocolate cookie demo. Remember, creaming method, we always do with the paddle. Room temperature butter, room temperature eggs, super important. You take your fat, which is our butter, you cream it on medium speed with your sugars. Scrape the bowl. You add your room temperature eggs, one at a time, scrape the bowl. Then the vanilla goes in, mix, scrape the bowl. Mix all your dry ingredients together separately, dump them in all at once, mix on a low speed until 3/4 of the way incorporated, and then chocolate chips go in last, fold them in by hand, portion, chill the dough before baking, right? So quick little recap of what we learned, and we'll go on from there. Thanks.